Okay, I think we all know why we're here. Let's go ahead and get into it. So, if I remember correctly, we are right about here on this panel, starting with a pretty beefy thing to talk about here. So, something you're going to see a ton in Japanese is this repeating set of characters called the ko, so, a, do pattern of words. Each one of these has their own specific meaning by themselves, and they're usually the first half of another word. So, members of the ko family will usually refer to things that are in your proximity. They're usually translated as this something, or they mean something that has to do with where you currently are. So is when it's close to the person that you're talking to. So if it's in another person's proximity, or if it's off near somebody else, then the so words are what you're going to use. We also translate them as that something. Ah words are when you're talking about something that isn't close to you or the person that you're currently talking to. It's off in the distance somewhere. Ah words usually get translated as something like over there or that over there, which make them a little bit close to so, but it's usually going to be something that you have to like point to the other person to get across where exactly it is. Finally, do words are going to be like question words, like which one or where something is, so on and so forth. Do is going to be questions. I'm once again coming at you with a weird tip that could or could not help when it comes to memorizing this idea here, right? Try and think of ko words as things that are close to you, right? Close to you is when you're going to bring out your ko words. If you're using the so words, it's because they are things that are close to someone else. So in the distance or next to somebody else. If you're using your ah words, it's a little bit hard to see because of this. They are things that are far away from both of you, right? So if I go here, ah words are things that are far away from both you and the person that you're currently talking to. You bring out your do words when you don't know which. So if you need to ask a question about which or where something is, then do is what you'll bring out. As important as this pattern is, you don't need to memorize everything all at once, because every time we come across a brand new word that we haven't seen yet, we're going to go back over some of this to make it a bit easier to remember. And for right now, the one that we're focusing on the most is going to be the no line. The no sets kono, sono, ano, and dono are fairly unique because the no that you see in these words here is actually the exact same as the no particle. I don't personally think that you should memorize these as the no particle, because I think just memorizing the full words kono, sono, ano, and dono is a little bit more beneficial, because it'll get really confusing if you just try and learn these by themselves and then learn the no particle separately. But when you use them, you have to use them alongside another noun. That's what the dots are for. So not just kono, but kono noun, sono noun, ano noun, dono noun. I'll give an example. If I want to say something about this coffee, kono kohi, then I would say kono kohi ga and then describe it, right? So if I want to say this coffee is delicious, kono kohi ga oishii. Kono kohi ga oishii. So specify the thing I'm talking about, give it a description. If I want to say that person is mom, right? Sono hito ga ka desu, or oka-san desu, if we want to be a little bit more formal. Ano, you'll notice that the dots are in kind of a weird place, but that's because when we translate this concept into English, that's normally where it would go. So if I want to say that building over there, I would put the word building after ano, and then this is where it would go in English, even though it looks a little bit weird when you're doing both languages at the same time. Ano tatemono ga, and then whatever it is. So ano tatemono ga mise da. So that building is a store. Ano tatemono ga mise da. Now, once again, do are going to be your question words. So if I want to ask which something, so maybe I want to ask something like, which person is she? Which person is she? So maybe I'm looking for somebody specifically and I don't know which one I'm looking for. Dono hito ga kanojo desu ka? Or da no. Remember, no particle can turn your sentence into a question as well. It's just a question that you're expecting an answer to, right? So, dono hito ga kanojo da no? That is going to be the usage of the no line ko so a do words. The only one of those that we really care about right now is kono. So, kono would mean this something. Next up, we have the word monster. I kind of debated putting this in purple, but I think monster, if you haven't figured it out, monster is going to be the Japanese word for a monster. I think the word monster is fairly common. I'm not saying you're going to see it in every single manga out there, but you know what? I think it's common enough that we can just add it to our vocabulary list. So, monster, monster. You know what? If you've been following these lessons for a little while, you should be very proud of yourself. Give yourself a quick clap, quick pat on the back, because we've got a lot of topics here that we don't have to go back over. We've gone over the wa particle, we've gone over the word watashi, we've gone over the ga particle, and we've gone over the word to catch. So this starts from the te form. The te form is one of the most commonly used conjunction forms in all of Japanese. It has a ton of different usages, but its main purpose for existing is this. Usually, when you are making a Japanese sentence that ends in a verb or another kind of word, but we're going to focus on verbs right now because it's easier to understand this concept through verbs. Normally, verbs are the end of your sentence. You say the words and then you end on a verb. That is essentially how the Japanese language functions when you're making basic sentences. The te form is unique because when you're making a verb or another kind of word into its te form, it allows you to speak past what would normally be the end point of your sentence. And this can be used in a variety of different ways. There are endings that are specific to the te form verbs. There are also ways to make compound sentences using the te form, and that's actually the one we're going to focus on right now. So as always, let's get the all-stars out there. Nomu, taberu, suru. I've got good news and bad news for you. Here's the good news. We've technically already learned how to use the te form because te form and ta form work exactly the same. The only difference is you're going to use the e ending word instead of the a ending word. So I'll give an example. What is the ta form for nomu? If you were paying attention in one of the other lessons, I recommend you go back and you rewatch if you happen to miss it. No mu turns into nonda. Why is this? Because mu, nu, and bu all turn into the sound nda. If I were to give a second example word here, something like kau, kau turns into ka-ta because of the ta ending. Oyogu turns into oyo ida. Gu turns into ida. For example, I'm not going to go through all of them. Go back and pay attention to that, though. It's very, very, very important. So nomu turns into nonda. So that's its ta form. What does that have to do with anything? Well, da, de, right? That's it. That's the only difference. Instead of adding nda, mu, nu, and bu, add nde. Very, very simple concept. Taberu, its ta form is what? Tabe ta. So what's its te form? Tabe te. So easy. So easy. You've already learned this. Do not overcomplicate it. Whatever its a ending would be in ta form is just its a ending. Suru. Simple, simple, simple. So to become she, its ta form is shita, its te form is shite. That's it. That's literally it. So that's the good news. The bad news is obviously if you have not memorized the chart for ta form, you are completely sunk here. You have to learn this. Let me be clear. Te form is the most important type of conjugation that you have to learn if you're going to get into anything beyond basic sentences in Japanese. It is crucial, vital. So many endings need it. So many types of sentences need it. You have to learn it. Once you learn it, though, it's pretty simple stuff. Okay, so in the vast array of instances in which we can use the te form, which one specifically do we need at this very moment? That is going to be the compound sentence. So once again, the te form is unique in that it would turn what is normally the stopping point of our sentence, the verb at the end of the sentence, it allows us to speak past it. So we can use it in this case to add more to our sentence, essentially turning it into a compound sentence. If you'll notice down here, I've got a sentence. If you can't read it, that's okay. This is gakko, gakko, which is essentially the word for school. The ni particle, which if you remember from before is the direction, so to school or from school is going to be its usage. We don't know yet because we haven't hit the verb. And then we do hit the verb, and the verb is iku. Iku means to go somewhere. So if we're going somewhere, then the ni particle is going to be to, because you go to places, and the place we're going is school. Now, this on its own is a little sentence, and we can include the te form verbs to allow us to do two things within a sentence instead of just one. So here are some examples. Okay, so for group one, we have kohi o nonde. We haven't gone over the o particle in detail yet, so don't worry too much about it for right now. Just know that the sentence kohi o nomu is how we would say drink coffee. And if we want to continue past the word drink in that sentence, then we turn nomu into its te form, nonde. Kohi o nonde, gakko ni iku. What this would essentially translate to is, I will drink coffee, or I'll drink my coffee. The my is kind of implied here. And go to school. I'll drink coffee and go to school. That's my plan. Once again, don't focus too much on the vocabulary here, but this part of the sentence says asa gohan, which is a very common way to refer to breakfast, and then we've got our taberu. So asa gohan o taberu would be the basic way of saying I'll eat breakfast, or I'm eating breakfast. But here, if I want to continue past that to say a second thing, asa gohan o tabete gakko ni iku. I'm going to eat breakfast and go to school. The implication being that, of course, I'm going to eat breakfast first, and then afterwards I'm going to go to school. Okay, last example. You might remember this one. I'm trying to keep it as basic as possible, so I'm just going to keep reusing the same examples that I've used in previous episodes. Kaji. Kaji is to do chores, your laundry, cleaning your room, so on and so forth. Kaji o shite, do the chores. Gakko ni iku, go to school. I'll do the chores and go to school. Kaji o shite gakko ni iku. So that was a pretty long explanation, but what you should basically take from this is if you end on the te form and then continue your sentence past that to talk about another action or continue talking about something else, it is essentially like saying this and this. Sorateru, nothing complicated about it. It just means to raise something. So this is raise as in like raising a child or raising a pet. Obviously, since we're talking about catching Pokemon, it's probably going to be a little closer to raising a pet than raising a child, but I digress. Raise can also mean other things, I suppose, like if you see like an old samurai western, somebody takes on a new student and they can use the word sodateru to talk about raising that person, as in developing their skills and treating them like a son or a daughter. That's also fine too, but to not overcomplicate it, sorateru is to raise or take care of somebody. Next up, we've got another fun one, nda. This is going to be where things get a little bit interesting. Nda is an ending, but it's not like a verb ending. It's actually a sentence ender. So the entire sentence has its own ender, and that is nda. And it's what I call the dramatic ending. Dramatic ending might seem like a weird name now, but it's the only possible way I can think of to encompass everything that nda is doing. The nda ending can be used at the end of basically every sentence, besides one weird exception with mas form. But if you've never studied Japanese before, don't even worry about it, okay? You don't have to worry about it at all. If you have studied Japanese before, mas form and nda don't really mesh. Outside of that, you can use nda for just about anything to add emphasis to that action. I can see some confused faces out there. I can see some of you don't quite get it. Let me go ahead and explain. Nda would be the equivalent of the way that we use words like really, totally, absolutely in English. They're not really adding new meaning to the sentence. They're more just emphasizing the thing that we're trying to get across. I'll give some examples. Okay, so here are our basic example verbs, but I've went ahead and put them into their sentence forms already to save us some time. Kohi o nomu, we just went over that. It is to drink coffee. Again, don't worry too much about this particle here. Just follow with me. Kohi o nomu means to drink coffee. So the sentence is something like, I'll drink coffee. Now, if I were to add the nda to make it more dramatic, the full sentence would be kohi o nomunda. So kohi o nomu is just making the statement, I will drink coffee. Now, if I end it with nda, then I'm adding a bit of drama to the sentence in that, oh, I'm absolutely going to drink coffee. For some reason, I'm just very emphatic about the fact that I'm about to have some coffee. I'm very excited about it. I'm really going to drink some coffee, or I'm totally going to drink some coffee. All of those things match the nda ending here. Sushi o taberu, I'll eat sushi. If we want to make it more emphatic, sushi o taberunda, I'm totally eating sushi, okay? No matter what happens, I'm going to have some sushi, and I'm very excited about it. Now, I would never make this sentence because sushi is disgusting. But, you know, if you're a weirdo out there who likes to eat sushi, you could totally say something like this. I've swapped out chores with something a little bit more exciting. Game is how you say video games in Japanese. O, again, don't worry about it. Suru is to do. Basically, in Japanese, instead of saying that you play something, you normally say that you do something, even if it's something enjoyable, like we have in English. So most sports will be the name of the sport plus suru, and most activities like board games, video games, so on and so forth that we use play with in English, we use suru or to do in Japanese. So game o suru is I'll play video games. So if you want to say that emphatically, get really into it. Game o surunda. I'm so excited to play video games. Now, admittedly, I'm stretching it a little bit here with the so excited too. Could totally see using it in a translation though, but I digress. So again, the nda ending does not change anything about the actual meaning of the sentence, but it's used to show emotion or put a little bit of oomph behind your sentence, the same way we use really, totally, and absolutely. And again, I cannot stress this enough, this does not only happen with these kinds of sentences. We can do it with past tense verbs, negative tense verbs. We can do this with noun sentences, but you have to do something a little extra there, so we're not going to go over it. And you can do this with adjective sentences as well, and it would be like, instead of saying big, super big, oh my gosh, it's so big, oki would be big. Okinda would be like unbelievably big, really big, absolutely big, so on and so forth. This is also another reason you have to get it out of your head that you're translating one word literally into another word, because things like nda are going to pop up so frequently where you just have to create an image of what's going on in your head and then try to turn that into what we would say in the same situation in English, and it's never going to be the same thing twice. So just understand that going forward. I'm wasting my color coding system. Let's fix that. Okay, kara. Kara is a fairly big particle because it's made up of not one character, but two, and it kind of means the same thing as since or because. I say it kind of means that because this can get translated a bunch of different ways. The way it's currently being used, it's actually being used as because, since the girl is using it to explain something that happened in a previous panel. And that being said, we're just gonna take a quick break here, okay? I have to talk to you guys about something. Okay, you can tell we're getting serious because we're going full screen for this one, okay? This is a PSA to everybody who has been learning Japanese through an app or through textbooks or through worksheets. Please listen carefully to what I'm about to say. You need to stop taking every single Japanese sentence at face value. What you have to do is pile the meanings of all of these texts onto one another to create a full scenario. One of the things that you absolutely have to get used to doing in Japanese is following a conversation or following a trail of thought. One of the things that I deal with so much when it comes to teaching private students is there is a huge problem with actually taking multiple bits of information and using them at the same time. In this context, we are using this sentence to explain something from a previous panel. So you need to come into the new panel with the context of everything that happened in the previous panel. What will happen so often is I'll show somebody something like this, and then they'll get totally lost. They have no idea what's going on because they're only taking this bit of information and trying to translate the sentence. That does not work. This is working in conjunction with everything that's happened before it in order to create a story. This only becomes a problem if you're somebody who has been learning with nothing but practice sentences your entire life, and it's one of the things that pushes immersion learning past textbook learning or class learning. You have to get out of example sentence territory where all the context you need is within a sentence, then you forget all of it, then move on to the next example sentence. When you are getting into real life conversations and real life examples like manga or anime, you need to stop doing that. You need to go into the next sentence knowing everything that's happened up to that point and taking it all into account. Okay? That's it. Rant over. Let's get back into it. Okay, where was I? So kara. Kara means since or because. Now, the reason this is so important is because she's basically explaining in this bubble right here how things are going to play out based on what we had before. Up here, you'll remember that this guy was like, are you really going to catch it? I don't know about this. I don't know if you can really do this. And she tells him to stop being dumb because she's totally going to catch and raise this monster. Okay? So in a case like this, the Japanese do another kind of interesting thing here where when a sentence has because in it, like you're going to explain something, the kara is usually used at the very end of the sentence rather than the beginning. So for example, if in English I have a sentence like, why didn't you buy it? And I wanted to point out the reason and say something like, because it was too expensive. Okay, so the full thing here is, why didn't you buy it? Because it was too expensive, okay? The because here at the beginning of the sentence is said first in order to show that we are giving them the reason or the explanation that they wanted in their question. So in Japanese, this same thing would be, どうして買わなかったの? So you don't, again, have to be very clear about this. Don't try and memorize everything that I put here. I'm going to explain it all, and then I want you to forget it immediately. どうして is how you ask like why or how come something. Kau means to buy something. Kawanakata, if you put it all together, would mean did not buy something, which is something we'll get into a little bit further. And then no, of course, if you remember from before, if you put no at the end of a sentence, not only is it a question, but it's a question that you're demanding an answer to. Like, I really want to know the reason why this occurs, right? Why didn't you buy it? Okay, I'm very curious. Why didn't you buy it? Takai is how you say that something is expensive. And through conjugation magic, sugiru is how you would say that something is too much of something. Takasugiru would be the word for like way too expensive or too expensive. Takasugita would be like it was too expensive. It was too expensive. And then the kara here, instead of because being at the beginning of the sentence, it ends our sentence. Takasugita kara, because was too expensive. Okay, so again, the entire point behind this is just in Japanese, the word because goes at the end of the sentence. Why is that? I don't know. I don't make the rules, I teach them. Next up, we got a brand new sound, which is A. A is essentially going to be your effort noises. It's basically like grunting in English. So when you hear a character say A, it's usually because they're like putting their effort or putting their weight into something. Here, you can see that the little girl is throwing a ball, and the A kind of shows like how hard she's throwing it. Again, you'll notice that the actual word is A, but because we're elongating a sound in this case, that gives the emotion that she's really putting her weight into it. It's not just A, it's A. So she's really trying to throw this thing. She's absolutely fastballing this towards the Pokemon, and that is what this sound means. We are once again done with a panel, so it's time for some translation. Go ahead and take a moment to pause the video, use everything you've learned so far to see if you can translate this panel for yourself. I'll hop in with a translation in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So for our literal translation here, because I'm totally gonna catch and raise this monster, I think totally works the best here as our nda, because I think that's absolutely what she's trying to make happen. And then here, since the sound A is just a sound that the character is making, even though it's not like a natural thing in English or something that we would normally put in English, I think it's totally fine to keep it literal here. No reason to change it up at all. Cleaning it up a little bit, I think the word because is a little bit unnecessary. Obviously, I'm not going to tell the Japanese how to speak their own language here, but I think when translating into English, I think the word because just doesn't even need to be here. So just, I'm totally going to catch this monster and raise it. Again, making this sound a little bit more like a kid, I think they would probably phrase it a little bit closer to something like this, and without the because, I think it just flows a little bit nicer. As for the noise here, the effort noise, A is a little bit closer to like haya or hya in English. So maybe the I doesn't even need to be here. Honestly, just hya is probably also a little bit better. And honestly, looking at it, I think I like this a bit more. So I'm totally going to catch this monster and raise it. Hya! Finally, for our English rewrite, something a little bit more like, I'll catch and raise this monster all on my own. Again, I'm adding a bunch of context that isn't actually here in the bubble, but going off of what she said before in the English rewrite here, I basically told her, I basically had her saying that she was going to pull this off, that she can totally do this. So having her say very confidently what her plan is, that she's going to capture and then raise this monster. And again, avoiding the word Pokemon because we're not supposed to know what that is yet. It's very important for a part coming up next. I'll catch and raise this monster all on my own. Again, I think a bunch of kids that are trying to one-up each other, I think this works really, really well for the situation we're in, even though I'm technically adding a bunch of stuff that isn't there. And then I kind of don't like the effort noise here in English, so I'm replacing it with more dialogue, trying to think of something that the character would actually be saying as she's throwing the Pokeball. So just watch is probably along the lines. Something else also works here, something like just you watch. Or just watch this. is going to work here just as well, but again, they're a bunch of kids, so I didn't want to make it too complicated. I think that works really well for her, personally speaking. But again, you don't have to take any of these super seriously. We're not here working, we're just studying, you know. Alrighty, guys. I'm so proud. I'm so proud of my little kohai. Because today is the first time we can actually go beyond one panel. We actually know enough stuff that we need more than one panel to reach our daily limit. So let's now move on to our next panel here. And luckily, this one is only one sound long, so it should be a pretty easy one. So the sound here, ora, is the sound that a character makes when something unexpected happens. It's basically you were caught off guard, you weren't expecting things to go the way they did, and then they did. So honestly, this one translates pretty cleanly to some English words like huh or what, or try and think of some other things that you would say if something catches you off guard or if something happens in the way that you weren't expecting it to happen. So as silly as it is, I do want you to try and translate this one as well. I will see you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, this is going to be one of those times where coming up with 3 different translations is going to be a little bit pointless, but you know what? We're going to try anyway. Little Roland is just, huh? Right? Get caught off guard. She went in there with full confidence. She was like, I'm totally going to capture and then raise this monster. And then you know what? It does not look like it worked at all. So she says, huh? Another thing she could say in this instance is what? Because again, she went in there with full confidence. She threw the ball as hard as she could. She definitely thought it was going to work. And then it just didn't. So in a case like that, saying what totally works. Finally, for our rewrite, again, there's almost nothing you can do with something as small like this, but adding a little bit more disappointment to her voice, I think, works here. It's like she's stuttering over her words because she's just so shocked that it didn't work, even though she tried her hardest. Oh man, not 1, not 2, but 3 panels in one lesson. How lucky are we? And in addition to that, we get the introduction of one of my all-time favorite manga characters, Reddo-sama. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm so excited. So first things first, we've got yet another noise, yawn. Yawn is like the noise you make when you're disappointed. It's literally like disappointed. So in English, saying like, oh man, or that is the kind of thing that yawn tries to get across. And once again, we are not just saying yawn, she is saying yawn. She is elongating it because of just how unbelievably disappointed she is that throwing the ball didn't work. Got ourselves a brand new particle to work with. This one's going to be the mo particle, and it means something along the lines of to or also. What it's basically implying is the thing marked with mo shares a characteristic with something that we've seen previously. So I too, or I also, and then whatever the rest of the sentence is. Keep in mind that the mo particle does not work without some kind of prior context. You need something to say that this thing is similar to this thing. So for example, if we take a look at this totally copyrighted image here, hopefully they never find out. I digress. If we were going to say something that is similar between these 2 animals here, there's a couple of different things we could say, but the most obvious thing is that they're both brown. So the word for brown in Japanese is chairo, cha being tea, funnily enough. So tea colored is how you say it. I digress. So chairoi is how you say brown, or something is brown. So if I wanted to say that the dog is brown, inu ga chairoi, or inu ga chairo da. Neko mo chairo da. So watashi mo, I also, or I too. And then what is it that she also did? Shippai. Shippai is going to be our brand new kanji word. Now the word on its own, shippai, actually means a mistake. So if you want to talk about a mistake you've made, shippai is the word that you would use for mistake in that case. However, In this case, it's going to be used more along the lines of like a mess up or like screwing something up. So, I also mistake, aka I also messed up. Now, there's no ta form here, but again, these are a bunch of kids. They are talking in a very slangy kind of way to each other. So the ending that you would normally expect to be here is not actually here. There would normally, if this was a bunch of adults talking to each other, or if they were talking more formally to one another, there would be an ending denoting the fact that this is past tense. But again, I don't want to have to go into another PSA here. You need to take into consideration that the mistake she is talking about is something that happened in a previous panel. Carry the context with you. These are not example sentences that you just translate one right after another and then forget about. Okay, for our next bubble here, we start with the sound ha ha ha. I'm not gonna throw you a curveball here. Ha 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 means whatever you currently think it means. It is the sound of laughter. I hope I don't have to explain this more than this, okay? Ha 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 should be pretty self-explanatory. Sonna. We have another member of our ko so ado pattern here, this being so. As you should remember from before, ko is like saying this, so that, that over there, and do, which. You cannot always use them this way, but most of the time that is the idea that they're trying to get across. The na ending here is going to be saying that or that kind. So for example, konna translates to something like this. This is ko, like is going to be our ending here. Sonna, like that. Anna, like that over there. Donna is like what? So obviously you don't have to focus on all of these, but I just want to really drill this concept into your head because you're going to see koso ado all over the place when it comes to learning Japanese. For right now, focus on sonna, like that, or another way it can translate is that way. The reason that way works here is because way kind of implies like the way that somebody's doing something or like how somebody is doing something. So it also works really well. This is not a new concept, but it's something we have to talk about. Nda. So we haven't really gotten to this yet, but da, when it conjugates, turns into the sound ja. So if you've learned more formal Japanese, you may have seen something like ja arimasen. If you haven't studied Japanese before and you don't know what this is, don't worry about it. I'm only taking this concept right here. Basically, the word da, and sometimes des does this as well, turns into ja when conjugating. However, there's kind of a bad habit speech pattern where some characters in anime and manga especially will just use the conjugated form without actually conjugating. So sometimes you'll see the word da as ja. Don't be thrown off by this. There is literally no difference between nda and nja other than the fact that it's a speech pattern thing. So when you see this nja here, again, we've already learned this concept. Don't overcomplicate it. Dame. This is another pretty popular Japanese word, so it's one you're going to want to remember. Dame is the word for no good. It can also mean other things too. It can mean really simple things like bad, but it basically implies that something just won't work the way that it's currently going, or just something is not good in some way. So if you ask somebody for something and they say dame, it's basically the same as them saying no or absolutely not. It always implies the most negative form of whatever it is that you're currently talking about. So here, like that being dame is like saying that way, no, not good. That way, no good. Or that way is bad, right? Speaking of which, we have the last word in today's session, da. We've already gone over da before. It's the Japanese word for is. It can also extend to am and R as well, because the Japanese does not differentiate between those concepts. But this is the first time we've actually seen it in the manga, so now we're going to add it to our word list officially. So is no good or is bad is the way that dameda is going to present itself. Alrighty, I'll say one more time here that we have a panel to translate, so go ahead and get on that. Pause the video if you need to. Go over the concepts we've gone over in this video. I will see you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So some of you may remember that we actually translated this as our example in the orientation video. So you know what? I'm going to be a little bit lazy here, and I'm just going to reuse that because I think that is roughly the best that I could do. Could I do it slightly better if I put some time into it? Maybe, but I think this totally works. So for our literal translation here, the girl saying, I also messed up, works here really well. Yawn, you needed a disappointed sound, so is totally a sound you make when you're disappointed about something. I also, and then messed up is going to be the literal way to say shippai in this case. Now, of course, our boy Red here, our lovely, lovely Reddo-sama comes in and says, ha ha ha, that way for sonna is no good for dameda, and then at all is like him yelling it because there's a yo at the end. So ha ha ha, that way is no good at all. For our cleaned up version, saying aw is also something you say when you're disappointed. So aw, it didn't work. She's showing the thing that didn't work by saying watashi mo shippai. I think those two work off of each other just fine. So instead of saying mess up or mistake, just pointing out that it didn't work is totally fine here. And then of course Red comes in. It'll never work like that. I like this dynamic because she says the word didn't work. And then he responds by saying it'll never work like that, kind of playing off the fact that she said didn't work. I think that gives the characters a little bit more of a, of a relationship with one another. So I think that's probably my favorite here. And then, of course, for our English rewrite, she says, oh, man, I think man and yan, because they sound so similar to each other, I really like translating yan as man or oh man, because, And then I didn't get it either. She's being much more specific about the thing that she messed up or the mistake that she made. She also didn't capture the Pokemon. It's a little more literal because she's pointing out the fact that she did not get the monster, and that's the thing that we're trying to do, and that everybody has messed up so far. And then Red comes in and says, it takes a little more than that. This doesn't make as much sense now, but as we get further in, you're going to see why I love Red as a character so much. He is extremely arrogant. He's very full of himself. He is a 10-year-old who hangs out with a bunch of 6-year-olds and thinks he's just the coolest kid in the entire town because he's better than all of these little kids at capturing Pokemon. So that's what makes him such a lovable character. I think coming in and saying something very arrogant, like it takes a little more than that, to kind of not only put them down as not being capable of doing this and pointing out, how bad they are at catching Pokemon right now, but also begging himself up, kind of like subtly implying that you can't do it unless you're as good as I am. It takes a little more than that, aka it takes being me. It's kind of the idea that I'm getting across here. So again, some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it, but I think I like number 2 the best of all these, but I digress. That'll do it for another one. Don't forget to come back later when we get on to our next panel and finish up our first page here, I think. The progress you felt here in being able to do 3 panels at once instead of just 1 is just a small taste of what you're going to get in the pages to come. Don't forget to do the YouTube things, and I will see you in the next one.